Let's try to understand what conduction, convection, and radiation are. First, though, let's talk a little bit about what heat is. So heat is the kinetic energy, the energy of motion of the atoms in a material. Here's a model of a crystal, and the little atoms, which are represented by these balls, are vibrating around, okay? And that is what we call heat. And the faster they vibrate, the hotter they are. So if it's a very fast vibration, that thing will be very hot. If it's a slow vibration, if it's not a very fast vibration, then it will be relatively cool. Now, conduction is when the heat moves through the material just by jostling, essentially. So if these atoms are vibrating very fast, that's going to transfer that energy to these adjacent ones, which are actually bonded on here, and then to these over here. And so gradually, through this solid material, the heat will conduct. It will move. And we can experience this, say, when we view a pot on a stove. We can touch the pot. If you touch the pot, then you might get burned, and that's because the heat is being conducted through the metal of the pot and even out to the handle of the pot. And so conduction is one way that heat can travel. Another way is by convection. So if we want the heat to move from here to here, one way would be to conduct it there, but another way would be for it to actually move. And so if we actually allow the material to move, then it can be much more effective in transferring that heat. But that doesn't work with solids. That only works with fluids. And so a fluid would be, say, again, our pot of water. Here's our pot of water. And if we heat the bottom, so we put heat at the bottom here, and that heat is transferred through conduction through the base of the pot here into the water, then the water at the bottom gets hot. And if it gets hot, it becomes less dense. And as it becomes less dense, it rises up. And then it releases that heat at the surface, and then it cools off and goes back down. So it becomes denser and goes back down. And what happens is you set up these little circulation currents or convection currents. So that's what convection is. Now, radiation is when that energy is transmitted directly through the space in between, and it doesn't actually need a medium at all. You can feel it if you put your hand next to your pot. You can feel the heat coming off of there, and that is radiation, and that is actually infrared radiation, which is passing through the space between you and your hand and the pot. But what's really happening is, again, if we look on a molecular level, is that these little things are vibrating back and forth, they're vibrating around, and when they do that, these are actually charged particles. And if charged particles like electrons and neutrons and things like that vibrate back and forth, they generate electromagnetic radiation, which we know of as light. And that electromagnetic radiation carries some of the energy away from the material. So if something is warm or hot, its little atoms are going to vibrate, and that's going to cause electromagnetic radiation or light to leave that material and carry off some of the energy. Now, the sun is very hot, and it radiates mostly in the visible light range, although it does radiate across the rest of the spectrum as well. And that radiation can travel even through a vacuum, even through the vacuum of space. And so that's how energy from the sun gets to the Earth.